talking about limiting the Federal Reserve's powers or getting rid of the Fed altogether. He even wrote a book about it. Its title, End the Fed. In it, he blames the central bank for the current economic troubles and calls for auditing Fed policy. Starting next month, the Texas Republican may finally get his chance as he takes over the House subcommittee that oversees the Fed. Now, in a first on CNBC interview, the man himself, Texas Congressman Paul. Congressman, nice to have you on the program. Thanks so much for your time tonight.
Thank you, Maria.
So you've written the book titled End the Fed. Do you still want to eliminate the Federal Reserve?
Oh, sure, but I think the Fed will end itself before I'm able to do it. The book essentially concludes that we at least should start ending the Fed by allowing competition. I don't like the idea that they have monopoly control. It's a cartel. They get to print the money. And the Constitution really doesn't give them that authority. The Constitution said that only gold and silver can be legal tender. I want to legalize competition and allow individual Americans to use gold and silver in competition as money. Today, if you do that, you can go to jail, and I don't like the idea that the power gravitates to the Federal Reserve. They literally can have a yearly budget bigger than the whole Congress, and then what they do is kept secret. We don't even know where they spend the money. We're just starting to crack that nut. In order to get some of this information, we should continue to do it.
So let's talk about that. I mean, as far as do you favor a gold standard?
Well, that's what the Constitution says we should have, is a gold standard. I mean, my personal belief is I'd like the market to determine it. The market can pick, but the market over 6,000 years has always picked something of real value, like gold and silver. So they would be high on the agenda. But I'm not in my personal beliefs, I'm not overly rigid and say thou shalt have this, because markets are pretty smart. But right now, the markets are getting smart because they're rejecting the idea of a fiat standard. And they're starting to realize it's this fiat standard and manipulation of the money supply and interest rates by the Fed that gave us the bubbles and now has given us this financial crisis that we're in. And I don't believe that we're anywhere near the end of this. I think we're about to see the collapse of the bond bubble, and you're going to see skyrocketing interest rates and price inflation coming back, and that'll be a whole new ballgame for us to face.
So will you use your new position to pursue that goal? I mean, in terms of overseeing the Fed, what changes will you make as the overseer of the Fed?
Well, I think what we need to do is start off by making sure that everybody understands the business cycle and why we have unemployment and why the Federal Reserve is responsible for that. Then I should also pursue the transparency to find out where this money went. They released some figures a couple of weeks ago, but they left a lot of unanswered questions, and we need to ask more questions. Then we should have a real audit of the Fed. We ought to even count the gold to see if they didn't loan out the gold or sell the gold when all the central banks were doing this. And then eventually we have to talk about monetary reform. Internationalists are already talking about it. You know, Zolik has even mentioned that maybe we should include gold in this discussion. Mm-hmm. So we're well on our way to the necessity of having a new monetary standard. I do believe that the dollar reserve standard is going to come to an end.
Well, I mean, let's talk about that because, you know, the administration, Treasury is always saying that they believe in a strong dollar, and yet the dollar gets to a level and then just falls back again. So what do you think is behind that?
Well, you know, it always fascinated me that the Treasury is in charge of a strong dollar and the dollar policy, and yet it's the Fed that creates the money. So the Fed determines the value of the dollar. If you print a lot of dollars, the value of the dollar has to go down. And then when the world financiers reject the dollar, then they won't have any control. You can talk about and trade currencies, but ultimately the markets rule out. Even when they fix the price of gold like they did for many, many decades at $35 an ounce, the market overwhelmed and the Bretton Woods system broke down. And now this system is breaking down, and that's why gold has broken out again, because there are too many dollars. This whole idea of just the Federal Reserve being able to create $600 billion and throw them out there with the expectation of lowering interest rates, and what do they get? Higher interest rates.
Right. That's exactly what we're seeing. So, well, let me ask you this, Congressman. I mean, what do you say to those people who question whether you can actually be a fair and effective leader on a panel that oversees monetary policy when you're on the record as being opposed to the Fed and its missions?
Well, I think there's every reason to believe that there would be a fair discussion. I think that I welcome the people who disagree with me to come to it. There's nothing I would like better than to have the Austrian economist debate Paul Krugman. And he's the arch champion of spending and printing printing money, even more than Bernanke is. He complains about Bernanke not printing enough money. So I'd love for him to come to the committee and debate people who believe in honest money.
When do you expect inflation? You know, we had Mike Milken on earlier today, and he said the markets are basically telling you the same thing. So when do you think inflation becomes a real problem?
Well, the big problem is the distortion of the definition of inflation. People want you to think only about prices for inflation, but inflation is when you increase the supply of money, which manipulates interest rates, which causes business people to do dumb things and debt to rise. But the question should be, when do I expect prices to go up? I said we're in the midst of it. A lot of commodity prices are going up, and also gold prices are going up, bond prices are going up, are way up. They're in a bubble. So prices are really very high, and they're responsible. The question is when is the CPI going up? But the CPI, as measured by the old method of CPI, is going up over 4% per year. So it's there, and it's going to get much worse.
And then, of course, there's labor expenses as well. So labor costs. When does that go up? Let me get your take on the federal response to this economic slowdown. I mean, it just seems that the Fed repeatedly comes out and says, look, we are going to be there if the economy deteriorates further. We're going to be there. We're going to be there. How come it's all on the Fed? Okay, so the federal government, we've got this tax cut extension. What's the outlook for final passage, number one?
Well, it looks like the tax package probably will pass, but that won't make the economy any better. It could make it worse. The economy could get worse whether you pass it or not. It probably doesn't matter that much. But the Fed only has one tool, and that is creating more money. We got ourselves into this mess because we spent too much, borrowed too much, inflated too much, and regulated too much. And we're trying to get out of it by spending more, printing more, regulating more, and you just can't do that. You can't get out of a problem by doing more of the same thing. And we have not allowed the correction to occur. You want liquidation of debt, and the debt really hasn't been liquidated. It's been transferred. It's been transferred by some holders of bad debt in Wall Street and transferred to the taxpayer, and now the Federal Reserve holds that. And this is a burden on the people and a burden on the economy. That's why unemployment is very high, and this is why people are losing their houses, because there's still a great debt burden out there. It's very similar in many ways to what Japan went through. They didn't allow the liquidation of bad debt. You can't pretend that if we just give you this moral promise, this moral hazard, saying no matter what, we're going to take care of you, just perpetuate all your mistakes, then you'll get into a very, very dull, slow, declining economy, and that's what we have.
Why do you think that the tax cut extension could actually make the economy worse?
Well, the extension, extending the tax breaks, which I'm going to vote for, but there's also some stuff in there like spending. There's some spending in there, and some people argue that it could push up the deficit, which they don't know for sure, because sometimes if you keep taxes down, you actually have. I think if taxes went up, people can't depend that will raise revenues. Revenues may well not go up, so that's why I say it's unpredictable. But I take the position that we should do whatever we can to keep taxes as low as possible. So that puts me in the position of not allowing these tax breaks to disappear. Yeah,
well, we'll have to see, because the spending part of the problem has yet to be addressed. Congressman, good to have you on the program. We so appreciate your time tonight.
Thank you.
We'll see you soon. Congressman Paul from Texas.